Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this special meeting of Council. This meeting is called for the specific purpose to consider the 2016-18 budget for the City of Brampton. Under Council's meeting rules, no other business can be considered at this special meeting. All members of Council are present this evening. I want to remind everyone at today's meeting to please ensure all cell phones and other electronic devices are turned off or placed on a non-audible mode during the meeting. Members of Council, we established a temporary rule to prohibit the use of smartphones and other mobile devices by members during this meeting except for tablets and laptops used for meeting agenda business. I ask all members to please put away your phones until after the meeting is adjourned so we can focus on today's meeting, including listening attentively to all public and stakeholder input, receiving staff comments, and focusing on members when speaking and participating in committee decision-making. Thank you. We have a motion by Councillor Pelleshi, seconded by Councillor Bowman, that the agenda for the special meeting of December 9th be approved as printed and circulated. All those in favor? All those opposed? That's carried. Does any member have a declaration of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act for any matter to be considered on today's agenda? Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to declare a conflict on the compensation portion of the transit budget portion. As my son, the unionized transit, as my son works for transit.
Okay. Councillor Willens.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to declare a conflict under planning infrastructure, under the Works Department, salaries, as my brother works for the Works Department.
Councillor Fortini.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to declare a conflict for my daughter working for the non-union Park and Rec.
Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll declare conflict on the non-union portion of the transit budget in compensation as my daughter works for transit.
And Mr. Clerk, I also wish to declare a conflict as my son is an employee in transit. So, have you got a record of that, Mr. Clerk? Okay. So before we as a council consider the 2016-18 budget and hear from the public on this matter, I would like to ask Mr. Peter Honeyborn, Treasurer and Executive Director of Finance, to please come forward to provide a short presentation this evening about the 2016-18 budget recommendations. After Mr. Honeyborn's presentation, I would ask council that we refrain from asking questions at that point. We will proceed to hear from the public next through delegations, and after hearing from the public, council then can ask its questions and we can consider the 2016-18 budget. Mr. Honeyborn, please come forward with your presentation. Welcome. I understand copies of your slides, item D1, have been provided to each member at their desks, and extra copies were made available for the public.
Thank you, and good evening, Madam Councillors. So this is the 2016 to 2018 budget summary and recommendations. Excuse me. And tonight is the culmination of probably the most extensive formal involvement of Brampton City Council in the development of the city's budget in at least the last 3 decades. It started nearly 6 months ago with what was to be many meetings with council and staff. On June 16th, the first council workshop was held to review initial operating and capital budget plans and to establish budget targets with the goal to ensure increased transparency, no surprises as budget discussions progress, ample time and opportunity to review and discuss details, and meaningful discussion on council expectations on a go-forward basis. On July 8th, City Council formally approved the targets to be used in the development of the annual budgets. Council approved a target of 2% for base operating adjustments, plus an annual 2% infrastructure levy in response to the recommendations from the McCarter report in order to maintain our assets in a state of good repair, and a provision for significant new or enhanced services. At the July 22nd workshop, Council was presented with the proposed capital budgets for 2016, 2017, and 2018, including spending envelopes for those 3 years, major projects, ongoing projects with potential completion by 2018, and progress on previously approved projects. At the September 18th workshop, Council was first presented with the preliminary tax increases for the city portion of the tax bill and the overall tax bill, and it included a review of operating budget targets approved by Council. It provided a status of the update for 2016 to the 2018 operating budget. It presented and discussed pressures, challenges, and opportunities. And the feedback we received included direction that the overall tax rate should not exceed 3%. There were 4 meetings with Budget Committee in October where staff presented the detailed business plans and proposed tax increases for 2016, 2017, and 2018. As a result of Council direction, there were some minor amendments to the budget presented in October that were incorporated into the budget presented at the December meetings. There were 4 Budget Committee meetings in early December that resulted in a few more minor amendments. The proposed tax rate increase that was presented during the December Budget Committee meetings was virtually unchanged from what was presented to the Budget Committee in September and in October. I'd like to spend a little bit of time on the General Rate Stabilization Reserve, as there's been some discussion on that topic. During the Budget Committee meetings and earlier this month, there was some discussion on the General Rate Stabilization Reserve. The next 2 slides provide some history and the purpose of the General Rate Stabilization Reserve. In February 2002, City Council passed a resolution that established a target for the reserve at 10% of budgeted gross operating and capital budgets, with contributions to come from the tax base. The Tax Rate Stabilization Reserve was first established in 1991. In 2004, it was renamed to be the General Rate Stabilization Reserve, which is sometimes referred to as GRS. The city's GRS continues to act as the city's primary contingency fund to ensure that the city can meet the legislative requirement for a balanced operating budget at year end. It can be drawn upon for when unforeseen or non-recurring events occur, essentially protecting the taxpayers from major volatility in tax rates from year to year. Potential future pressures on the GRS include the effect of climate change, with increases in the numbers and the intensity of storms that we've been seeing. We don't know yet what the Ontario government is going to provide to Brampton with respect to the outstanding $12 million on the ice storm claim. If it is something less than $12 million, then the balance will need to come from someplace like the General Rate Stabilization Reserve. We don't know what the requirements are for a new university in Brampton. We don't know what the humanitarian requirements are for resettling refugees in Brampton. And we don't know if there may be some impacts of major economic downturns in future years. And the GRS is designed to respond to these pressures. During this month's Budget Committee meetings, there was also discussion on the differences between ongoing funding and one-time funding. Ongoing funding is required for ongoing expenses. For example, providing our fire services is an ongoing expense that requires an ongoing funding source, such as property taxes. One-time funding, such as draws on the GRS, are meant for one-time initiatives, such as capital projects, non-recurring purchases, one-time pressures, such as the costs resulting from the ice storm, and shortfalls in such areas as revenues. Using one-time funding to pay for ongoing expenses is like using money from your savings account to pay your hydro bill. It depletes your savings account and creates greater financial exposure. So I'd like us to take a look at the impact of the GRS and what would happen if we were to reduce our tax rate by 1% with a draw on the GRS, as was discussed at one of the Budget Committee meetings. So this slide we've seen before, this chart we've seen before, it shows that the city-only portion of the tax bill is 4.9%, and the total tax bill impact for 2016 is 2.9%. 2017, it's 4.9 on the city portion and 3% overall. In 2018, it's 4.2% and 2.7% overall. So if we have a 1% draw on the general rate stabilization reserve to reduce the city portion of the tax bill from 4.9% to 3.9%, the result would be a reduction of 0.4% in the overall tax bill from 2.9% to 2.5%. However, because we used one-time money to get that 1% reduction, we're already starting in the hole for 2017, and we have to make that up, which means rather than a 4.9% proposed tax increase on the city portion of the bill for 2017, we'd be looking at a 5.9% increase. And instead of a 3% increase overall tax bill increase in 2017, we'd be looking at a 3.5% increase. And as we can see then in 2018, we would be back up to where we were before with a 2.7% overall tax increase. One area that's received a lot of attention is staffing levels. From the information provided the Budget Committee earlier this month, we saw that the increase in staffing levels was largely due to the growth in frontline services. During the last 6 years, transit staffing has increased by 64%, with more than 300 new staff added to support the city's commitment to providing a world-class public transit system. Fire staffing has increased by 12%. Other frontline staffing, such as staff who provide recreation services, maintain our roads, parks, our extensive park pathways system, and maintain our buildings, has increased by 16%. Support staff, on the other hand, has increased by less than 1.5% per year over the same period to provide the behind-the-scenes support to all the frontline staff. The annual increases to the tax bill since 2008 are made up of several components. The blue bars at the bottom represent the tax rate increases excluding transit, and on average, they are below the core rate of inflation. The city's commitment to public transit is a significant driver of the overall tax increases and reflects the public transit policies of the City of Brampton, the Government of Ontario, and the Government of Canada. This is a chart we've seen before. It's been updated within the last 2 weeks. BMA Management Consulting recently completed their independent annual survey of municipal property taxes. The survey results show that Brampton continues to have some of the most competitive property taxes in the Greater Toronto Area. For the average 1,200 square foot home with 3 bedrooms, the property tax bill is the 4th lowest. For the average 3,000 square foot home with 4 to 5 bedrooms, the property tax bill is the lowest. During the December Budget Committee meetings, Council members made some minor changes to the proposed budget. The net impact of these changes was to add $129,000 to the budget. Some of the additions included doubling the snow removal assistance to seniors from $100 to $200, and for corner lots from $150 to $300. 2 additional enforcement officers were added, and 1 Sports Brampton staff position was added. So the proposed 2016 operating budget recommended by Budget Committee is comprised of $359.1 million of labor costs and $247.9 million of non-labor costs, for a total expenditure budget of $607 million in 2016. Transition to full accrual budgeting commenced with the 2015 budget. After taking into consideration items that do not affect property taxes, such as depreciation expenses and assets acquired from developers through the subdivision assumption process, the 2016 accrual budget includes total expenditures of $706.7 million and total revenues of $835.7 million, for a full accrual budget surplus of $129 million. Ontario municipalities are legislated to have balanced budgets, meaning we cannot budget for a property tax-related surplus or deficit. However, full accrual budgeting does result in a surplus for Brampton and many other municipalities. This surplus is not available to offset property tax increases because it is made up of a number of items that do not affect property taxes, like depreciation expenses and on our tangible capital assets, the value of subdivisions that are assumed, and the development charges and gas tax revenues that are recognized as we invest them in capital projects. The property tax bill consists of three parts. For every $1 on the tax bill, the region gets 38 cents. The school boards get 17 cents, and the city gets the remaining 45 cents. The city's 45 cents pays for public transit, fire services, parks and recreation, public services, and many other municipal services. The 2016 budget recommended by the Budget Committee includes a 4.9% increase to the city's portion of the tax bill. That 4.9% is made up of 1.8% for day-to-day operations, which is 0.3% lower than the core inflation rate, a 2% infrastructure levy, and 1.1% for significant new or enhanced services, such as the continued expansion of Brampton Zoom transit services. So the budget recommended by the Budget Committee results in an increase of 1.6% on the tax bill for all municipal services provided in Brampton, 1.3% on the tax bill for infrastructure investments, with a total tax bill increase of 2.9% in 2016. Our budgeted operating revenues in 2016 are provided primarily from property taxes, which represents 69.7% of the total revenues, user fees and service charges, which represents 24.6% of our total revenues, and the remaining 5.7% from other sources. Based on the budgets that have been recommended by Budget Committee for 2016, 2017, and 2018, the tax bill increase in 2016 will be 2.9%, 2017 will be 3%, and 2018 will be 2.7%. Budget Committee is also recommending capital budgets of $113.6 million in 2016, $143.9 million in 2017, and $160 million in 2018. The 2016 capital budget incorporates the Budget Committee addition of $285,000 for the Powerade Center ammonia condenser. Over the last year, City Council has authorized the implementation of some significant improvements to the management of our finances. Multi-year budgeting was introduced to provide predictability and stability to our budgeting processes. We implemented capital contract budgeting. We took steps to reduce the development charges deficit. We introduced an annual 2% infrastructure levy. We had a commitment to strengthen the city's reserves. We initiated the development of a long-term financial master plan, and we initiated the development of a corporate-wide corporate asset management plan. The long-term financial master plan is scheduled to be completed by June 2016, and the corporate asset management plan by December 2016. The financial improvement measures that have been implemented have resulted in positive results, particularly from Standard & Poor's and the C.D. Howe Institute. C.D. Howe commented that Brampton was only one of 3 municipalities that implemented their recommendations for full accrual budgeting. Last Friday, Standard & Poor's released their full rating report on the City of Brampton's financial health. According to Standard & Poor's, the City of Brampton has a very strong and well-diversified economy, exceptional liquidity, very strong budgetary performance, a strong revenue side budgetary flexibility, a very predictable and well-balanced local government framework, strong financial management, and very low debt and contingent liabilities. This positive financial report card that has resulted in the highest credit rating possible of a AAA stable shows that Brampton is on the right track to be financially well-positioned for the future. Madam Mayor, that concludes my presentation for this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Honeyborn. I have two speakers who might want to. Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. To Mr. Honeyborn, thank you very much for the presentation. If you can just, I wouldn't mind if you can just provide some comments, because one of the features in terms of our long-term, or I guess our planning exercise, so you're going to have the long-term financial plan, which I think, notwithstanding, is a very important exercise. But I'm really excited about the corporate asset management plan, because I think that's vital to our financial health and to where we go as a city. So if you can just provide some comments on how important that is to the city that we develop that corporate asset management plan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The corporate asset management plan is critical on a go-forward basis. One, to ensure the continued receipt of gas tax funds because it's a requirement of the gas tax funding program. But more importantly, or as importantly, is it will pull together all the different corporate asset lifecycle management systems that we have and present to Council a overview of our corporate asset requirements over the long term. And that corporate asset overview will help Council to prioritize what assets we want to invest in across the corporation. Right now, our asset investments are really department-based. So each department presents their asset requirements, and then we make decisions to fund them or not fund them. The corporate asset management plan will enable us to prioritize on a corporate-wide basis right across the corporation as to what's most important. And so that's really what the critical components of that are.
Thank you. And Madam Mayor, just one more question. So regarding the residential tax comparisons, through Madam Mayor, even though our taxes in comparison seem, I don't know, competitive is not the right word, lower than expected, but are also, I think there's a correlation with our property value. So if you can speak to that, because often the residents, when I get approached, it's always with that impression that our taxes here in Brampton are higher than other municipalities, even though they're lower, but are also, for example, in comparison to Mississauga, our property values are also lower, so thus we would be paying a lower rate. Is that a fair assumption to make?
Madam Mayor, that's correct. What happens is it's basically, and I apologize for simplifying it in this way, but it's an algebra equation. There's a tax rate and there's an assessed value for the property, and the two of them, one multiplied by the other, gives you your actual property tax bill that you pay. So in Brampton, we might have a higher tax rate, but a lower assessed value, average assessed value, as compared to another municipality such as Oakville. So Oakville might have a lower tax rate, but because they have a higher assessed value, they still end up with more taxes than us, for example, on the 3,000 square foot home.
Through you, Madam Mayor, thank you for the clarification.
Councillor Scolvieri.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Peter, for the presentation. I had a question regarding the two additional project standard officers. When that was presented for consideration, I asked staff to provide some information to us about what can we expect how the service level to be affected. From my understanding is presently we have a response within 24 hours. If somebody puts a complaint in, within 24 hours somebody's there to check it out. So by adding two additional people, how is that going to affect the service level, and what can we expect to achieve by adding the two extra people? Are we going to get better investigation results? Are we going to get more? I know that one of the big issues is about basement apartments, and very difficult to investigate because people don't want to refuse to let people in, or the bylaws to check the house. There's nothing really we can do to really force an entry. So what can we expect by adding those two extra people that was actually suggested by a member of council.
Chief Simmons?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. There's three clear areas of benefit by adding these additional enforcement personnel. One is to continue to maintain that 24-hour response time, which is something that council expects, and as does the community. As the city grows, there are quite potentially more complaints. And while we're able to respond to the complaints right now and tend to them inside 24 hours, what we're finding is that as more complaints come in, the management of that particular file then gets stretched out. So the resolving of the individual case may take a little bit longer than we prefer. By adding some additional enforcement personnel, we're then able to keep the management of those individual files inside a reasonable time frame, because we now have more folks tending to the complaints. Another area that that works in our favor with these responses is that we can distribute the files more evenly inside the enforcement division, and that helps with us being more efficient in our delivery. But again, it's focusing and maintaining that 24-hour response time. I think finally, and perhaps of greater benefit, is that council has expressed an interest in more proactive patrolling and an effort by our enforcement staff. And these additional officers will allow us to explore that proactive opportunity with greater effort. And so overall, by adding folks to enforcement, there is some benefits. And what we look forward to is being able to report to council during the course of 2016 where we're starting to see those enhancements and benefits associated with it.
Okay, thank you for that. And through the chair, do we get an annual, I haven't seen it lately, but do we get an annual report of how many bylaw infractions and have been in a yearly basis have been occurring over time, and how many get resolved, how many are outstanding, how many are not haven't been resolved because of as I said, the basement apartment, people won't let people in. Do we get a breakdown of that?
Through you, Madam Chair, when council sees those statistics is around the time that we present our business plans and walk through what it is that the overall department and then by division is that we are that we're tending to in our business, but also as we develop our key performance indicators. And you saw a presentation on that a few weeks ago. So what we would look forward to doing inside 2016 is not only providing you with those same stats, but also additional information on the improvement of our response time and the file management. So you will start to see it inside next year with greater frequency, that being more than just the end of year in the presentation of the business plan.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Peter, just a quick question about slide 12. So we see the lower end, I guess, of the spectrum, 1,200, and I guess you get to about 3,000 square foot. I believe I asked the last budget as well. What is the, I think most residents would probably live in the 18 to 2,400 square foot area, I'm assuming. What is how do we compare to the other municipalities when we're looking down the middle, like on average about 2,000 square foot?
Through you, Madam Mayor, unfortunately, we don't have that information. The BMA Management Consulting that conducted the survey, it was an independent survey that they conducted. They were the ones that selected the home sizes to do the comparisons across all the municipalities, and they didn't select an 1,800 square foot home. Perhaps what we could do is suggest to them in the future they might consider including that as part of their survey. But at this point in time, they surveyed based on 1,200 square feet and 3,000 square feet.
If you could, because we got about 1,000 and 3,000, see right in the middle, 2,000 for maybe next time. Thank you.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you. If I could, through you, Madam Mayor, ask staff to go to page 13, where we talk about the proposed amendments to the operating. I guess I saw and I have to recall how the motions were written, but for the property standards officers and the sports position, I thought the motion was written that there would be no budget impact on the existing budget. And I think there's a difference between the existing budget and the budget as proposed. So I think what you've done with this summary is offset 3 positions with 3 positions. And that was not my understanding. I saw the $336,000 at the bottom as savings off the bottom line for the 2016 proposed budget, and that the others would be absorbed into the budget less that 336. So maybe
Mr.
somebody
Honeyborn?
could clarify.
Through you, Madam Mayor, if 2 things. One, I did bring this or summarize this at the Budget Committee meeting on Monday, December 7th, and I did reference that the 3 offset the other 3. Unfortunately, nobody raised it at that point in time. However, if we could ask the clerk to perhaps read the resolutions that were passed with these positions, that would be good.
Are they included in the package that was handed out?
Through you, Madam Mayor, they are. If members can turn to its item F1, which is the summary of recommendations from the Budget Committee. And if you turn to page 7 of 12, Part 7A and 7B speaks to the Enforcement and Bylaw Services Division budget and the amendment to add the 2 additional property standards and bylaw enforcement officers with the budget impact. And Part B says that these 2 full-time positions and the associated budget be found within the existing larger staffing request such that it has a net 0 impact on the budget. And the additional reference on, I believe it is the public services budget, which is on page, I'm sorry, it's on the delegation from Mr. Don Stoddard, which, just give me a moment, is on page 3 of 12. At the top of page 3 of 12, there is a clause 3, which says that a full-time position, in brackets, a recreation programmer, sports tourism, within the Public Services Department, proposed for consideration as part of the 2017 budget submission, be advanced to the 2016 budget for approval with a net budget impact of $84,000, and the associated budget be found within the larger existing staff request such that it has a net 0 impact on the budget.
Okay. Well, we didn't have a copy of the resolutions written before us, but I guess my understanding when I supported it was that we would find within the existing budget, not the proposed budget, the costs of those 3 positions, and that the other 3 positions would be savings. So the 2016 budget would be reduced by a marginal, well, I guess the 336 less the 180 of the cost of the snow clearing. Thank you for that clarification. I guess one other comment. It's interesting, we go through this every year, and we go through it all year long, it seems, that folks in Brampton think that their taxes are higher than other municipalities, and you know, it's really difficult to get that message out. I don't know, you know, how we convince people that, you know, when you're comparing like homes in various municipalities, that you know, the range is not all that dramatic, but certainly people think they're paying more in Brampton. Maybe they just feel like they're not getting the level of service, and I think there's probably a correlation between those 2. Thank you.
Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Peter, I just want to follow up on the one-time impact funding from the GRS. We do have things in our budget that are non-recurring for 2016. So if we were to, you've given the example here that if we took that 3.9 million out in a recurring expense, we would be behind the 8 ball and we'd have to increase to 5.9 next year to make that up. If we used that $4 million for a capital project for a one-time expense that we may have in our budget here somewhere, does it have the same impact or a different impact?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think perhaps what you're referring to, Councillor, is, or it could work this way, part of the increase is the 2% infrastructure levy. That is one-time funding. So although it does have a compound effect over time because it's not available every year in the base, but you could reduce the infrastructure levy by down to 1%. However, to do that would be running against what Mr. McCarter recommended that we do, which was to invest in our infrastructure because we are very far behind on our backlog of maintenance or our facilities that require work. So it is something that can be considered, but it does have a long-term cost.
Okay, but from the, I think it's $12 million we're putting into the general rate stabilization fund in savings from this year, if we took money from that general rate stabilization fund, if we didn't put $4 million of the $12 million in there and use that to fund a capital expense, does that still put us in the same hole next year? A one-time expense?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to do that wouldn't affect the tax rate that's before you, because you're talking of what you're referring to as the capital budget. So we could fund something from the capital budget, but it isn't going to. It will not have an effect on changing that tax rate.
Okay, because it just, when I look at our budget going into 17 and 18, we're still at 4.9% increase for the Brampton only portion next year, 4.2% in 2018. So, you know, again, just simply on the Brampton portion, 4.9% this year, combined with a 5% last year, that's 10%, and another possibly 10% in the next 2 years. So by 2018, we've increased simply the Brampton portion to, it's the optics of it by 20% over 4 years. So what are we doing in order to try and get future rates down below 4.9?
Through you, Madam Mayor, as I explained earlier, the 4.9% is made up of three components for developing the tax rate. And those three components were authorized by Council at the July 8th Council meeting. The first component for each of those years, which is providing for day-to-day operations and for expansion of services that are less than a half a percentage point, the day-to-day operations component is at or below the core inflation rate because that's the council target. So everything goes up in price. So if we don't increase our taxes to cover the increase in prices, then we should be looking at reducing service levels. That's the two choices. We increase taxes or we reduce service levels. The second component of that tax increase is 2% each year for infrastructure levy because we are behind on our infrastructure levy contribution. Our annual depreciation expense is roughly $115 million a year, and our contribution to funding that depreciation expense is about 60% of that. The third component is to provide the tax requirement for enhanced services. This council has made a commitment to expanding our transit service beyond the level of service that was provided in the past. That comes at a cost. So that component, which is the third component for new and enhanced services, is what that plus the infrastructure levy plus the provision for day-to-day operations that is at or below inflation is what gets you to 4.9% on the tax portion of the bill, or the city portion of the bill. So if council wanted that number to be less, then they could look at day-to-day operations and say, we want that to be less, so what services are we prepared to cut? Or if you wanted the infrastructure levy to be less, you could do that and say, what infrastructure are we prepared to not invest in and let fall into disrepair? Or we could say, in terms of our new and enhanced services, maybe we don't want to expand our public transit system at the rate that we've been expanding it at. So those are really the choices that council has.
Thank you.
So, Council, we have two staff reports to bring forward for your consideration. We have item E1, a report from finance staff. That's the 2016 to 18 operating and capital budget. And item E2, a report from the Finance Department and Strategic Communications Division regarding the city's expenditures for communications as requested by the Budget Committee through a motion voted on at Monday's meeting. And for those in the audience and for those maybe watching at home, the city will be publishing Mr. Honeybourne's slides and these reports on the city's website after the meeting. Before we go to our public, I just wanted to make a few comments and welcome everybody to this special council meeting to discuss our budget. You've heard over the past several months, council has met with various community groups. We've held 5 telephone town halls and participated in numerous call-in shows to hear directly from you, our residents, about what is important to you in Budget 2016. You will recall that Jim McCarter, the Auditor General, reported to this council back in January, which seems like a long time ago, that there were 3 main areas of concern that would continue to require our ongoing attention. Mr. McCarter highlighted the need for us to take meaningful steps to maintain our infrastructure assets. He recommended that we get a better handle on our operating expenses, and he suggested we find a better way to communicate with all of our residents. Based on his advice, this council began to address these concerns in our 2015 budget, but there's still significant work ahead. Unfortunately, Brampton and our entire country is in the midst of an economic downturn that's causing governments and residents, both globally and domestically, to struggle. Brampton's economic growth hit a peak in 2004, but we've struggled to make any significant gains since then. Our unemployment rate continues to be stubbornly higher than the national average, and we continue to see our local businesses struggle to grow, and there's a growing demand and unacceptable wait list for affordable housing. As a council, we are responsible for the financial well-being of the corporation and the city, and we must therefore demonstrate considerable discipline in how we manage the city's finances, which requires difficult decisions both now and in the future. Our residents told us that they face difficult financial decisions on a daily basis, and they wanted us to ask ourselves, just as they do when they're having to make choices, to consider the following when we were trying to justify the decisions that we make. What is the cost of our wants when our needs continue to grow and burden us? During our first budget subcommittee meeting on September 18th, I told council and staff I was committed to working together to achieve an overall property tax impact that would not exceed 3%. Staff have met this goal and have brought forward a proposed 2.9% overall property tax increase for the 2016 budget. I know that staff has worked very hard to bring forward a budget that respects our taxpayers while continuing to meet the needs of our rapidly growing community. So I want to thank our Treasurer, Peter Honeybourne, and our executive leadership team for all your hard work and our commitment to reach the goal that I set. During the final day of budget deliberations, there was some discussion, and there has been this evening, about whether the city should use a portion of our rate stabilization reserve fund to artificially decrease the overall property tax impact. This reserve was created to address any catastrophic or economic blows to the budget if another ice storm hit or a flood. It would be a risky decision and a move that flies in the face of prudent, responsible, and sound budgeting. And we've heard from our treasurer more than once and senior staff that this isn't the recommended course of action. The city's policy regarding the rate stabilization reserve, which was put in place in early 2000, the balance in this reserve should always be maintained and restored to an equivalent of 10% of the combined operating and capital budgets. We currently have approximately $53 million in this reserve fund, but we are still considerably short of the current target of $74.2 million. Now is the time for council to continue to be disciplined and to show restraint if we're going to meet this target within this term of office. The city's ability to now replenish our reserves has played a significant role, I believe, in the city recently seeing improved reports and ratings from C.D. Howe and Standard & Poor's. These improved ratings could lead to increased attractiveness in foreign direct investment activity, and if Brampton is to reach our full potential in the global market, we will need to protect our reserve funds to stay the course and to continue to improve our financial management. Before closing, I wanted to address an inaccurate story that appeared yesterday in the newspapers. The article posted last night made a claim that there is an increase in labor expenditures in the operating budget for the mayor's office. What that reporter has failed to capture, however, is that in the 2016 operating budget for my office, we will actually have an overall decrease of 1.9%. I campaigned on and continue to strive for more open and transparent government at the City of Brampton, and I'm open and welcome to the scrutiny of my office, our expenses, and the value we provide. This has been a challenging process for all of us on council, and I ask that all details be presented to our residents accurately. So, we agreed we would hear from the public next, so we will proceed with the public delegations before council's turn for questions and consideration of the budget. Please note that the public notice regarding this meeting was advertised on the city's website throughout the city's community engagement activities on the 2016-18 budget and published in the Brampton Guardian on November 19th and 26th. I will call each delegation in order, and if other persons are here tonight who wish to speak to council about this report, I ask that you please come forward after I've called the last delegation forward, since this is a designated time in this meeting to hear your comments about the budget. For all public delegations this evening, you will each be given 5 minutes to speak. This is to ensure that everyone who wants to speak will get a chance to address council. The clock will be running in front of you at the podium just to let you know how much time you've used. When you do come forward, please state your name for the public meeting record. Our first delegation is Mr. Javinder Sodhi from the Homeowners Welfare Association. Welcome.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
clarification before the delegation speaks.
Councillor Spovieri.
Yeah, thank you. On page 13, Peter, where you have your overview, you indicate that there's a $129,000 increase on the proposed budget. So will that take us up to 5%? What are we looking at with that additional 129,000?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we have incorporated that $129,000 into the numbers that are presented to you tonight.
So can you figure out what it would add up to if we incorporate it?
It already has been incorporated in what's being presented. So the 2.9% overall tax increase includes the $129,000.
So you achieved the neutrality that council directed in the resolution.
Council directed that we add $129,000 to the budget. We've done that, and the tax rate increase is 2.9%.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Sodhi? Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, councillors. Some of them new faces for us, and some are the old faces. They have saw it. We came for different issues, concerns of the residents. HOVA, Homeowners Welfare Association Consumer Rights Protection. That's an organization we work for. It's for Peel region, especially for Bramptonians, because we have most issues. And we are united. Bramptonians are united. Only our council is not united on providing services to the residents. Can you go next slide, please? If not us, who? If now, when? We see hall is empty. That means it's not people didn't want to show up. They lost faith in the system that they're going to be heard. I have a personal experience to approach Madam Mayor. Staff blocked me off not to meet the mayor who we choose, who we selected, who we elected. That's my personal experience. I'm not talking about somebody else told me anything else. We were blocked off for the issues. For years, decisions of the wrong decisions of the city are still waiting for implementation, not have been done. Previous council made a decision, reversed it, wrong decision, still nothing have been done for the residents. Going back to the agenda, let's stop blame game on others. LRT, we are divided. Tax increases, we are united. Service to the residents, again divided. University, still in the air. Industry, if we are increasing taxes with the rate we are doing it now, how we can encourage the industry to the town? We haven't put a cap on housing industry. Brampton is a sleep city, we all know, including our mayor and councillors. We need to work on bringing in industry. Highway 50, you drive along, industry on one, houses on there. Mississauga, there is nothing wrong in learning from our peers, which is City of Mississauga, Vaughan, and Toronto. They have a lot of industry. They have a lot of businesses coming to their cities. Still today, in a downtime, It's only as per our mayor, we are struggling with the numbers, and also numbers of the unemployment rate. And our counselor said, Alan Moore said, Bramptonians are concerned about services. That's true statement. Really, they are concerned about services. We all are concerned about it. And Jeff Brown just mentioned, if we go this path, 20% will be by 2018. If that's what you want to choose for the not only homeowners, it's for the industry, for the business owners too. So we are losing faith in Brampton City. So are you planning to do something to it? And schools, when you allocate a size for the school, there's a parking lot, there is a building, there is no playground for the children. When we develop a new riding, like new subdivision, park, residents are paying the money for the tax in their taxes when they bought a house, for the park, for the levies, for everything. All they get it is a double-decker parks because land is getting squeezed in. When I come in to get a permit for a side entrance or extension in the house, there are a lot of problems in the system. When a builder comes in 2 feet, a cat can't walk in, but there is a side entrance. Still, 2 years back, we came in for the back door entry in the houses because the patio door is blocked off. Today, still people are complaining. I get more complaints than as our city representatives because they are not being heard. The developers have not been controlled yet. Nothing has been done on that part. And again, affordable housing is a dream to this city now. All we are here asking is to the respected council members and mayor, with due respect, please defer this tax increase and ask for a public debate. Our mayor, Linda Jeffrey, believes in having a referendum. Can we call a referendum on the city's performance of 1 year? So that way people have a faith there should be a full hall here for the residents, and they trust in their leadership, they trust in the services you are planning to provide to us.
Mr. Sodi, your time has elapsed, so
Yes.
appreciate you.
All we are asking is defer. You know, that's only 2 delegations you have it. Still there is a time bound.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here today.
Yes.
Okay.
And we want,
Mr. Sodi, your time has expired. I have to go to my next delegation.
that's what the respect we are getting from mayor. And I think that will continue if the change we were offered. I think the change will coming back in 2018.
Thank you.
Again, if this is the behavior our representative is going to be having now.
Thank you. Is Mr. Sandeep Goel here? Mr. Sandeep Goel? Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and all City Council. I'm a Brampton resident from last 11 years. And so Brampton City increased almost 10% tax in last 3 years. And now there is a survey, it's BMA Management Inc. I don't agree with that, guys, how they said the Brampton City pay the least tax estimate to all the cities. Brampton tax is almost 1.12%. Toronto City is 0.7%, Mississauga City is 0.8%, and we are the highest tax paid. Brampton resident is the highest tax paid. I don't know how they bring this BMA management system. Now they talk about the 1,200 homes price. Mr. Sodi said, he talked about the Toronto, Mississauga one. There are more job opportunities, and you see their appreciation of the homes. Why is high? More jobs, better life in the city over there. And I don't agree with this BMA Management Inc., how they said we are the least paid Brampton. No. It's like injustice to the city Bramptonians. Now we talk about the GRS system, they talk about universities. Where is university? We are talking from so many years. Where we are? Nowhere. And the Brampton is the night city. People has to go outside the Brampton to work. Why? The Brampton city is not friendly for the business. The same thing, Mr. Sodi talked about the schools. I can give you examples. Copeland Public School on the James Porter, right? There's no parking for the parents. If they park over there, my daughter says kindergarten. What do you think? I'm going to drop my daughter on the curb and leave her alone on the curb and go home? No. If I park over there, they're going to write the tickets. That's our system. They're making money, they're just writing the tickets to the Brampton residents. And we just keep increasing the tax. And same thing, former Auditor General said, we paying too much money to our staffs. $607 million, and we pay almost $310 million for the city staff salaries. If you compare with other cities, we are overpaid. And this is total injustice for the Brampton city residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Dillon, Councillor Dillon, did you want to ask a question of the delegation?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment real quickly, though. I don't disagree with a lot of the things that you said, but I will say we're not where we need to be. We still have a long way to go, and one of the statistics that our treasurer was telling us that we got a B- rating now, and I think that goes to show we've come a long way from the previous 8 or 9 years where we had a D- rating. So this council said we're going to move forward, and I think we've taken the right steps, but we have to take a look at where we've come. We've had a situation where our economic situation wasn't the best, and there were some tough decisions that we did make, but like I said, we're trying to move in a positive direction. For example, we had a $1 billion infrastructure gap. We have debt. We had some reserve counts that were near empty. So there were some tough decisions that we had to make, but our population is moving towards 900,000 people in about 16, 17 years. So in order to keep the ship afloat, as I mentioned before, there were some tough decisions that we did have to make, but hopefully going forward we can bring that change that we spoke about in our last election. But I do thank you, and I do thank Mr. Sodi for coming down and giving your presentation. It's much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to come down and delegate council? Going once? Going twice? Okay. I have a motion here moved by Councillor Gibson, seconded by Councillor Palashi, that the following delegations to the special council meeting of December 9th be received: Mr. Jovinder Sodi and Mr. Sandeep Goel. All those in favor? Those opposed? That's carried. We also have a motion by Councillor Fortini and seconded by Councillor Miles that the presentation by Peter Honeyborn, Executive Director of Finance, Treasury, Corporate Services, to the special council meeting of December 9th entitled 2016-18 Budget Summary and Recommendations be received. All in favor? All opposed? That's carried. Okay, members of council, the 2016-18 budget is before us. Do members have any specific questions for staff about the budget, or do they wish to speak to the budget? Okay, we're now ready to vote on the 2016-18 budget. I propose the following order for voting this evening. First, a motion to consider item F1, the Budget Committee recommendations from its December 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 7th meeting. We will go through the Budget Committee recommendations page by page for voting purposes. Where necessary, council can take separate and/or recorded votes based on members' requests or declared conflicts of interest. Second, a motion to consider item E1, the new report from Finance and its 2016-18 budget recommendations for the current and capital budget. And third, a motion to consider item E2, a report from the Finance Department and Strategic Communications Division regarding city expenditures for communications as requested by the Budget Committee through a motion voted on at Monday's meeting. Okay.
Madam Mayor, I will, for the benefit of council, we will scroll through the set of recommendations that arose from the Budget Committee that ended this past Monday, and it'll be presented on the screen for members of the public. There are a number of motions in here that have been, for lack of then a word split out to accommodate those members that have declared a conflict of interest. And where those motions are noted, we'll make a note of that for those members to step away in accordance with the Act. So the first motion is to approve the...
Councillor Flesch?
Sorry,
Your question?
thank you. I was wondering if we could bring some of the items forward before we actually start voting on the budget, like E21, the information report that we asked to come forward.
Is that what you prefer to do rather than, you want us to deal with that first? We are going to be dealing with it. We were just going to go through the recommendations?
After we approve the budget, right?
No, it wouldn't. It'll be done at the same time. It'd just be done in a different order, that's all.
Okay.
It doesn't preclude you asking questions or making recommendations.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry. The first recommendation is to approve the budget agenda. There was a lost motion in terms of a procedural motion to change the time of resumption of the meeting. The first recommendation, BC 042, is to receive the presentation, the corporate overview from Chief Simmons and the treasurer. The next recommendation is in regard to some delegations that were received from the Jim Archdeacon Recreation Center Bike Scooter Committee. There was another delegation in regard to a delegation from the Brampton Board of Trade. There was a third delegation during Budget Committee deliberations from Don Stoddard on behalf of a number of local sports groups. And Clause 2 and 3 of that recommendation is requesting that a dedicated budget be established to assist sports groups plan, budget, apply, and host sporting events, and that staff report back on implementation steps. Clause 3, which was referenced earlier this evening, was bringing forward from the 2017 budget submission to the 2016 budget submission, as outlined in the presentation from the treasurer, the full-time position for the recreation programmers for sports tourism. And the fourth clause in that recommendation was for staff to take under advisement how a Sports Alliance Council could be created for further dialogue at a future standing committee meeting. There was the next set of recommendations address external agencies or boards. BC 046 was the presentation and the approval of the budget for the current budget and the capital budget for the Brampton Public Library. So the approval of the 2016 current budget is Clause 2. Clause 3 is approval in principle of the 2017-2018 current budget. Clause 4 is approval in principle of the 2017-2018 capital budget. The next recommendation relates to the budget for the Downtown Brampton BIA, the 2016 current budget request, and it was approving that budget request as well as approving the 2017 and 2018 current budget request in principle. And finally, there was a presentation from Mike Hardcastle on behalf of the Powerade Center, and that presentation was received. There were a number of staff presentations on the 2016 to 2018 current and capital budget. Those overview presentations were received in the next recommendation. And then the Budget Committee commenced to approve various recommendations in regard to the 2016 to 2018 budget for the various departments. The first set of recommendations here is in regard to a report from staff on changes to 2016 user fees for parks and maintenance operations. And it's approving those fees, and there is a companion bylaw to implement those fees for council consideration later on during this meeting. Then we get to Clause 2, which is considering a new budget request, and that's accommodated in the presentation from the treasurer this evening, and that's that the 2016 current budget for planning and infrastructure services be amended to increase the budget by $180,000 for the 2016 Seniors Financial Assistance Program, and that's in addition to monies that were already accommodated in the budget in 2015. Clause 3 is in regard to the 2016 current budget for the Planning and Infrastructure Services Department, with the exception of the salary and wages provisions for the Public Works Division. This is to accommodate, Clauses 3 and Clause 4 are to accommodate Councillor Willans. So Councillor Willans can vote on Clause 3, and he will have to excuse himself for Clause 4. So, Madam Mayor, it may be beneficial at this time, just for ease of reference for everybody, that we take a vote on Clause 4, and Councillor Willans can excuse himself during that vote.
Okay. You want to do it now?
This is a vote on Clause 4 only.
So that so council, is everybody clear that the 2016 current budget for the salary and wage provisions for the Public Works Division only of the Planning Infrastructure Services Department be approved as amended? Comments or questions? All those in favor? All those opposed? That's carried.
Councillor Willems can return. Clauses 5, 6, and 7 are approvals of the Planning and Infrastructure Services 2017 and 2018 current budget in principle, the 2016 current budget, the 2016 capital budget, and the 2017 and 2018 capital budgets in principle. The next set of recommendations deal with the Corporate Services Department. There was a report from the Treasurer on Budget Committee information requests. That report was received. There was an additional report on the 2016 to 2018 capital request from the Powerade Center, which is under Clause 2. And as the Treasurer has noted, as part of the budget approval, there is a request to accommodate the $285,000 capital replacement for the ammonia condenser at the Powerade. Clause 3 is a report from the Clerk's Office in regard to an amendment to the user fees bylaw for Clerk's Office user fees. Clause 4 is a report in regard to an amendment to the business licensing fees bylaw in regard to updating business licensing fees. Clause 5 is a report that was considered during the Mayor and Council Office budget, a report from the Clerk's Office in regard to a number of accountability and transparency officers under the Municipal Act. You can scroll down to Clause 6. Clause 6 was in response to a debate during the Budget Committee on the non-union compensation structure, and a motion moved and considered by the committee that the non-union compensation structure for 2016 going forward be approved in principle based on a combined grade schedule as adjusted annually by the cost of living adjustment and salaries adjusted by performance as presented by Dave Wilson, our Executive Director of Human Resources, subject to program implementation having no additional net 2016 budget impact, and a report back to the Corporate Services Committee on program implementation. Clause 7 was referenced earlier during this meeting, and that is a motion to add 2 additional enforcement property standards and bylaw enforcement officers in the Enforcement and Bylaw Services Division budget, and Part B of that clause was the reference in terms of those positions being found, the budget associated with those positions found within the existing staffing request, such that it has a net 0 impact on the budget. Clause 8, 9, 10, and 11 are the requisite clauses in terms of approving the 2016 current budget, 2016 capital budget, and approval in principle for the 2017 and 2018 current and capital budgets. The next department under consideration was the Office of the Chief Operating Officer. The first report is a report from staff on staff attendance at events in 2016. The second report, which was received, was on council newsletters and the annual calendar. The third clause in this set of recommendations was that there were 3 staff requests within the Strategic and Enterprise Services Division, that those were removed from the budget. Clause B of 3B was that the Chief Operating Officer report back on an alternative approach to achieving the City of Brampton corporate effectiveness goals of the strategic plan, and that 2 additional staff requests contained in the budget be held in abeyance, one for the Office of the Community Engagement, one for the Economic Development Office. Those be held in abeyance pending a report back from the Chief Operating Officer to Council in January 2016. Clause 4 was a motion moved and considered by the Budget Committee in consideration of communication related expenses across the organization. It is requesting a report, which is the subject of the report on tonight's agenda, item E2, in regard to communication related expenses. That'll be considered later on. Clause 5, 6, 7, and 8 are the requisite operative recommendations to approve the 2016 current and capital budgets and 2017 and 2018 current and capital budgets in principle. In regard to the program for the offices of the Mayor and Council, there was a recommendation considered that the budget for the Brampton Ombudsman, which had a budget impact of $125,000 in total, from the office and the Office of the Mayor and the Council office be referred for further discussion and further evaluation and a report to the Member Services Committee. Clause 2 was that the Open Government Cost Center, which contained those accountability officer type positions, be moved from the Office of the Mayor and Council budget to the Council and Administrative Services Division budget in the City Clerk's office. Clause 3 was to approve the 2016 current budget for the Office of the Mayor and the Office of Council. And Clause 4 was to refer some debate and consideration by the Budget Committee to the Member Services Committee for further consideration in regard to the Council Office receptionist position, Council Communications position, and the notion of reestablishing a Council newsletters and annual calendar, which had a budget impact of $250,000. Clauses 5, 6, and 7 are the requisite approvals or approvals in principle for the budgets of the Mayor and the Council Office. Public Services Department is the next department up for consideration. There was a report for approving user fee changes to the Council's user fee bylaw in terms of public service user fees except for transit. There was a second report under Clause 2 that dealt with Brampton transit fare increases to take effect March 28th, 2016. Clauses 3, 4, and 5 relate to matters for which members of Council have declared a conflict of interest. So the first is Clause 3, which is the 2016 current budget for the Public Services Department, except for salary and wage provisions for Brampton Transit and Recreation and Culture Divisions be approved, and all members of Council can vote on that. The second is Clause 4, and I'll suggest that maybe Council wants to consider this motion now, and those members that declared a conflict in regard to the Brampton Transit Division budget as it relates to salary and wage provisions excuse themselves from the Council meeting. And that would be Councillor Gibson, as I understand it, Councillor Miles, and Mayor Jeffrey.
Okay. Councillor Gibson?
So is in that portion of it, is the union and non-union in that? Or are we separating the union and non-union?
My understanding is it is both.
In that motion? Okay. So, Councillor Portini, do you mind sitting in the chair?
Taking a vote on Clause 4 only.
Sorry?
All in favor? Taking a vote on Clause 4 only. All in favor and all opposed.
Yeah. So, all in favor for Clause 4? So,
All opposed?
all opposed?
So that carries.
Carried.
Okay. So those members can now return. The next clause is Clause 5, and Councillor Fortini declared a conflict in regard to his daughter, who is a part-time employee, I understand, with the Recreation and Culture Division. So, Madam Mayor, I suggest we take a vote on Clause 5, and Councillor Fortini has excused himself from the meeting.
Council, Clause 5 says that the 2016 current budget for the salary and wage provisions only of the Recreation and Culture Division Public Services Department be approved as presented. All those in favor? All those opposed? That carries. Councillor Fortini can come back if you can hear my voice.
Clauses 6, 7, and 8 are the requisite approvals for the 2016 or 2017 and 18 budgets in principle. The next budget program was the Office for the Chief Administrative Officer, and Clauses 1, 2, 3, and 4 are the requisite approvals for the 2016 current and capital budget and 2017 and 2018 current and capital budgets in principle. General Government was the next program. I've included in red here because the red text is a little different than what is before members of Council on item F1. When the proper vote for this to consider conflicts of interest that members have declared to date is we should be taking a separate vote on Clause 3, which pertains to the wage adjustment provisions only that are contained in the General Government program budget, and those members that have declared a conflict can excuse themselves during the vote on Clause 3. This is necessary because not only does the program or department budget include wage provisions, but in the General Government budget, there are wage provision adjustments included in that budget.
In transit and parks and okay, so everybody who's declared a conflict?
Yes.
So, yeah. So Martin, Councilor Medeiros?
So I stand corrected, it's not parks. So those that declared a conflict in regard to transit division should excuse themselves for a vote on clause 4. And public works?
So it's only number 5. Just clause 3, right? So, just, yeah, all in favor of clause 3? All opposed? Michael? Carried.
Those members can return.
Abstain here. Okay.
So do we vote on the entirety of it? So Council, I think what we've done is we've separated parts of this, but can we vote on the entirety of the budget recommendations contained within F1? Any comments or questions? All those in favor? All those opposed? That's carried. Councillor Paleshi, now I think we can move on to your item, which you... Oh, E1. Okay. Before we get there, we'll be dealing with item E1, which is the 2016-2018 operating budget, which was distributed to you prior to the meeting. The recommendations are that we receive this. Are there any comments or questions on this item? Oh, and approve the recommendations that are contained below. Any comments or questions? Seeing none. Do we have a motion, a mover on this one? Thank you. It's moved by Councillor Miles, seconded by Councillor Paleshi. All those in favor of E1? All those opposed? That's carried. Councillor Paleshi, we're on E2, the item that you wish to ask some questions about. The communications expenditure report. Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Okay.
Maybe if staff want to give a brief presentation, it was just handed to us.
Mr. Kudajar, are you doing your report? Okay.
Through the mayor.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. The report before you is entitled Information Report Communication Expenditures. As the report indicates, it originated from Budget Committee just recently with respect to bringing back information related to communication expenditures across the entire corporation. As you can see in this report, the findings across the organization are highlighted in the document from pages 2 forward. You can see on page 3 of the report, we've identified the staffing cost as well as the programming costs related to communications across the organization. I'd like to point out that communications at the City of Brampton is really structured and defined in 2 ways. There's the corporate communications approach, there's a strategic communications function that's provided by a central group, and they provide a wide range of services that are highlighted that are corporate in nature. And then you have a level of communications that relate to the operational communications that are embedded within the divisions, the various divisions within the organization. And so we've compiled all that information and we've consolidated into one table that you can see on page 3. And on page 3, you'll see the salary and benefits across the organization totaling $3.4 million, and that's representative of approximately 35 in terms of head count. The direct and indirect costs, or the programming costs, are highlighted below. And you can see the total communication expenditures across the entire organization being on the order of about $6 million. Again, please keep in mind that distinction between the corporate communications function and those communication functions required to drive the businesses specifically at the operational level in the Rose Theatre, in Brampton Transit, and other major revenue-generating services provided by the city. To address the council resolution, we've also provided in the appendix a list of vendors that currently provide services to the City of Brampton. And they are listed by various categories. Appendix 1 shows vendors across all departments. On Appendix 2, you'll see media outlets used for advertising. And lastly, you'll see a number of purchase orders that we have open currently, including the Brampton Guardian, the South Asian Focus, and Snaps Brampton, three newspaper outlets. With that, Madam Mayor, that's a very high-level overview, but I want to thank the authors of this report, Mary Ann Gordon and Shirley Gannon. They pulled this report together over the last few days, and while there's quite a bit of information here, there's more information that can be provided depending on the questions that are asked today, and we'd be happy to bring further information forward over the course of the first quarter of 2016.
Thank you. Councillor Pleshy?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and please extend my gratitude for the quick work and well report that they've brought forward to us. We didn't give them a lot of time, but they sure put a lot of information together very promptly, and I appreciate that. Just a couple questions, and you know, we haven't had too much time to actually go through with great detail. Maybe there's an opportunity in the future to bring back, provided with more time, a greater amount of detail. We've always said that communications is very important to us in the city of Brampton. I don't think a meeting goes by when we don't refer to or talk about communicating with the public. Seeing that the staffing costs, all 4 departments across the corporation, approximately 35 staff, mayor and council office, print shop, public works, Brampton Transit. We have our corporate communications, they continue to, I guess, impress me and deliver a great service through the corporation. But I'm just wondering if there is any efficiencies to be had if we can amalgamate all of these departments into the one corporate communications department.
Through you, Madam Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor. One of the initiatives that we have identified is to look at the service delivery model of corporate communications at the City of Brampton. That was identified in our 3-year business plan, and that would be the opportunity to look at how we deliver services at the strategic level and at the operational level, and that is something that's in our work plan over the next 3 years. So we're on the same page in terms of looking at the service delivery model for communications here at the City of Brampton.
Is there any way we can, you mentioned 3 years, is there any way we can try and move that up a bit within this term of council?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that would be our objective, is to complete the service delivery review in this term of council. Yes.
And service delivery reviews across the corporation, correct?
We were looking specifically within the corporate communications function, but given this conversation, we can broaden the scope of the work to include the entire corporation.
As per communications?
Correct.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have now.
Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry. I echo Councillor Paleshi's gratitude in putting this together over a period of 3 days, basically. Thank you very much. It was a lot of work. I, too, would like to see a little bit more detail on it. I was sort of hoping to see expenditures in each area, sort of by department. Basically, for newspapers, for example, we did break it down, but I don't know whether it's broken down here, Dennis, as to what were the mandatory requirements out of the $250,000 we spent with, say, the Guardian, and what were the non-mandatory, what were our discretionary spends there. So I would like to see that come back at some point, so I know how much we're spending on, tender documents and things like that in the various newspapers. And, I would also like to see the percentages broken down a little more when we're talking about ethnic media papers. What percentage are we spending in the ethnic media papers compared to what we're spending in the Brampton Guardian, for example? And are we getting different coverages, same coverages? Are we greeting the same people, or are we sending it out to different people? Who are the readers of those pieces? So if we can bring that back in the future. The other question I had is, do we have, each of the 4 departments, do they put their own budgets together and then go out and put that spend out independently of a centralized purchasing area?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the purchasing bylaw is in place and it applies to all departments. It is not centrally purchased through corporate communications. The departments that have communications budgets in their operating areas would manage their expenditures, but in keeping with the purchasing bylaw, that's corporate.
Okay, so what I was sort of getting at was, I'll just pick a really easy one, iStock. Does the corporation of the City of Brampton purchase $10,000 worth of iStock images that can be drawn upon by each of the departments, or does each department go in and spend their own iStock money, for example?
In the area that you identified in terms of the graphic design services, a lot of those functions exist within corporate communications, so there is a central repository of photography, digital assets.
Yeah, I was just picking that as an example.
To use that as an example.
Yeah.
Not in all cases, though. I mean, there are blanket orders for advertising purchases, but in the main, the departments would work through their senior communication advisor, which is a corporate communications function, and they would work together to carry out the tactics that they have identified in a particular communication plan. Okay. But we do have a number of blanket purchase orders in place, and they're highlighted in this report.
Okay, so in effect, there would be some efficiencies we could find if we took a really close look at everything we do through the 4 various departments.
And that is our objective, is to undertake that service delivery review and definitely identify if there is potential for operational efficiencies.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I have no more speakers. I have a motion by Councillor Bowman, second by Councillor Fortini, that the report regarding communication expenditures be received. All those in favor? All those opposed? That's carried. We're now at public question period. We can deal with item H, public question period. This is where we invite members of the public to come forward to the podium, ask any questions about any decision made by council at today's meeting. There's a 15-minute limit for all questions and answers. Are there any questions from the public about a decision made by council at today's meeting? If so, please come forward, state your name for the meeting record and your question succinctly related to one of council's decisions made at today's meeting. Going once, going twice. Our next, no, do we have somebody coming down? If you want to come to the podium.
Brampton Guardian posted 4.9. When we call here, we find out it's vaccine increase of 2.9. So these clarifications, was it a number given wrong by the city staff or the mayor's office to the Brampton Guardian? Where was a mismatch?
Mr. Honeyborn, do you want to address this?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the Brampton Guardian didn't publish the complete information. They only published part of the information. So the impact on the total tax bill is 2.9%. The Brampton Guardian published a portion of that tax increase that was 4.9% on the city's portion of the tax bill. And that's what I spoke to earlier in terms of the 3 components that make up that 4.9. But the information that's published in the Guardian would lead one to believe that their taxes were going up by 4.9%. That is incorrect. It's 2.9.
That's a piece missing always, that the communication part is not there to the residents, and interpretation goes different ways.
You're absolutely right, and there was an attempt to provide clarification, and we were unable to receive that. Councillor Palashi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just if you can stay up for one more second.
Sir?
So after the Brampton Guardian published that, we had a budget meeting the next day, the following the day after. And we discussed that. We discussed why they did it and what we were going to do about it to communicate to the public about the inaccuracy of what you've just heard. I think staff and our corporate communications did an excellent job with the communication of that. How should we have done it differently, in your opinion?
Yes.
So in your opinion, how should we have communicated that to you?
My question is, for a layman, if you ask me, you run $1 billion budget, and I'm asking if there is a tax, we could have saved some money on different areas. If as a common resident, we don't know Bramptonians, we won't be able to suggest you. Because we had a question came out from Grant Gibson, thank you very much. He said, we are willing to listen what your suggestions are for improvements. Improvements can be only suggested when we know the inside information. So residents don't know the pieces where the budget money is being spent and where possibly we could have. Another suggestion we have is as a residents is when you are allocating kind of a bidding for a contracts, city issue a big contracts, it has to be open, transparent, and multiple bidders has to be. I work in a company where we have a lot of cost savings projects going on, and city could do the same. It's not different. It's not like we dig in always. We need the money. Let's dig in a resident's pocket to get the money out. We need to find resources where residents are not kind of frustrated keep paying more taxes with the less services.
Thank you, Mr. Sodi.
That's a piece. Thank you very much.
Councilor Toshi, did you have another question? Councilor Dillon.
Mr. Sodi, I was just going to answer your question as well. I was going to provide an answer. I think what you said may be correct, that I think we might need to do a better job, because what the residents want to know is the bottom line of what they're paying. And from 2.9%, 2.2 of that is the city portion. And just to give you a breakdown, about 45% of the tax that you pay, for every dollar that you pay, is from the city. And I believe it's 38% is the PO regional part. So there's two tiers that we have, the region and we have the city. And the education fills up the rest of it, sorry. But we have a two-tier system where the region handles certain things like police, water, gas, affordable housing, and garbage, social services, and the city handles the rest. For example, fire, like bylaw, recreation, parks, all the other things. Whereas a city like the city of Toronto has it all in one, pretty much. And so, what you want to see as a resident is the bottom line. And I think what we have to do maybe for next year is to convey that message to you a little bit better, because I think there might. Yeah, you can come up. Because I think there might have been a little bit of a confusion.
There are two pieces. Thank you very much. It's a valid point. The residents need to know the exact information. Same time, residents need to have a clear indication when you're talking about the budget for the Peel region. Are the city of Brampton is getting fair share back? One, representation-wise, we don't have a fair share to start. We all agree that. There is a cost associated with it, whether it's the water project. Same way in the city, same way in the school system. We talk about when you allocate a school spot in a new subdivision, are we looking for all the parking spots and playground for the children? This is a future.
So
we are building a future, not for one day.
Mr. Sodi, you've opened a whole new can of worms. You know too much. I think that's the challenge.
Thank you.
Thanks so much,
Ward,
Mr. Sodi.
did you want to speak to this delegation?
Yes,
or
I
to this
do.
issue?
Well, I guess generally to everybody. We passed a motion recently around this table, and it was approved, and staff are working on it, so that every meeting that's held in these council chambers will be videotaped and available on the city's website. So if you want to view, and I don't know whether this was videotaped, maybe the clerk can confirm.
He's nodding.
But these chambers have the capacity for videotaping. And so if you're not clear about something that you read in the paper about a meeting that took place, eventually every single meeting that was held in these chambers will be on the website, so you can watch it if you don't have a life, and you want to formulate your own opinion about what happened at the meeting. That's number one. The other is that available for the first time on the city's website is the 2016 operating budget account details. So every cost center detail is on the city's website, so you can go into each department and you can see where the funds are being spent. I found it enormously helpful, was using it throughout the budget debate. So it's all there for you to look at throughout the year, and not just, but in preparation of the budget time, so you can see where the funds are being spent. So I think significant improvements are being made in terms of making information available, but if you don't know it's available, you don't know to look for it.
Well, thank you for this good information. The problem is we are not being paid. We are activists. And we work hard from our personal time on all those social issues.
Well, we want to make as much information available to you so you can be as active as possible.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Moore. Thank you, everybody. We're now at the portion of the meeting dealing with the adoption of the city bylaws to give effect to council decisions made at this meeting, specifically in regard to fee and service charges changes approved as part of the budget. I have a motion by Councillor Gibson, seconded by Councillor Paleshi, to approve the bylaws at its special meeting of December 9th, to be given the required number of readings taken by the mayor and the city clerk and the corporate seal affixed thereto. All those in favor? All those opposed? That's carried. Our next item of business is item J, the confirming bylaw. I have a motion by Councillor Willens, seconded by Councillor Spolieri, that the following bylaw before council at a special meeting December 9th be given the required number of readings taken by the mayor and the city clerk and the corporate seal affixed thereto to confirm the proceedings of the special council meeting held December 9th, 2015. All those in favor? All those opposed? That's carried. Our last item of business is item K, adjournment. I have a motion by Councillor Willens, second by Councillor Dillon, that this council do not adjourn to meet again for a regular meeting of council on Wednesday, January 27th, 2016 at 1 p.m. or at the call of the mayor. And I want to thank the public for their participation and their attendance, not only this evening, but throughout the budget process. Thank you to our staff for their recommendations and their helpful advice. Thank you, members, for your respectful consideration and decisions on this matter. Before we adjourn tonight, I wish to remind everybody that council is next scheduled on January 27th. That's a Wednesday at 1 p.m. in 2016. Start time to be confirmed at the Corporate Services Committee meeting of January 20th. All those in favor of the motion to adjourn? All those opposed? That's carried. This meeting's adjourned. Please enjoy the rest of your evening and have a safe trip home tonight.